The village women whispered that I was the luckiest woman in Umuaya, but as my husband held my hand in the market, I was counting the seconds until we got home and his hand turned into a fist. I didn't need a savior, I needed a volunteer for a suicide mission. We meet Halimat, a woman who survives on the wisdom of her grandmother, Gogo Fadik. Her goal is peace and survival, but her deep flaw is her matter complex. She believes her orphan status makes her unworthy of a life without pain. She needs to overcome the fear of being alone to finally be free. Our wedding photo hung in the parlor like evidence at a crime scene. In it, Obaina's smile was wide and generous, his hand protective on my waist. I looked radiant in white lace, my eyes bright with something that might have been hope or might have been terror, even I couldn't tell anymore. Such a handsome couple, the neighbors would say, pointing at the mahogany frame. Obaina treats you like a queen. He did, in public. In the market, his hand found mine with practiced tenderness. He bought me the finest fabrics, carried my basket, called me my heart loud enough for everyone to hear. The women envied me. The men envied him. We were Umuaya's golden couple, proof that love still existed in a cynical world. But photographs don't capture what happens after the guests leave and the door locks click into place. The first time his fist found my ribs, I'd burned the yam porridge. A wife who can't cook is a wife who doesn't respect her husband, he'd said, his voice calm, reasonable, as if explaining mathematics to a slow child. The punch came so fast I didn't have time to protect myself. I learned quickly. Hide the bruises under long sleeves. Wear makeup to cover the fingerprints on my neck. Laugh louder in public to drown out the silence at home. Become smaller, quieter, more invisible with each passing day. Grandmother Gogo Fadik's voice echoed in my memory, a woman alone is a woman free. But she died before teaching me how to survive that freedom. I was an orphan married to a monster, and somewhere along the way, I'd convinced myself this was the best I deserved. 3 years of marriage. 3 years of counting seconds between his smile and his fist. 3 years of praying for a miracle that never came. Until the day my sister Aishara stepped off the Lagos bus, her eyes hungry and calculating, staring at my husband like he was a prize she intended to win. I didn't know it then, but she wasn't my curse. She was my escape route, dressed in designer lace and delusion. Aishara swept into Umuaya like a storm dressed in expensive perfume. Her hair was Brazilian, her nails were acrylic, and her ambition was written across her face in bold, unmistakable letters. She'd left the village 5 years ago chasing city dreams. She returned having achieved exactly none of them. Sister. She embraced me at the motor park, her jewelry cold against my skin. Look at you. Still beautiful, still simple. The word simple dripped with condescension. But it was Obaina she was really looking at. Obaina in his pressed agbada, his new Lexus gleaming in the sun, his public persona of successful businessman on full display. I watched her eyes catalogue his worth like an accountant totaling assets. Your husband is doing so well, she purred that first evening, sitting too close to him during dinner. The city men have nothing on village gentlemen. Obaina preened like a peacock. Hard work and God's blessings, Sister Aishara. A man must provide for his family. I served them groundnut soup, my hand steady despite the bruise blooming purple beneath my sleeve, a gift from that morning when I'd suggested we couldn't afford a second generator. Halimat is so lucky, Aishara continued, her fingers brushing Obaina's arm as she reached for water. A handsome husband, a fine house, respect in the community. Everything a woman could want. God has been faithful, I murmured, playing my role. But I saw it in her eyes, the hunger, the calculation, the belief that she deserved what I had. She thought she was looking at a throne. She couldn't see it was actually a cage with mahogany bars and a lock that only opened from the outside. Over the next week, Aishara's visits became frequent. She'd appear at the house with excuses, needing to borrow sugar, wanting cooking advice, claiming loneliness. But her eyes followed Obaina everywhere. Her laughter at his jokes was too loud, too eager. Her dresses became tighter, her necklines lower. And Obaina. He noticed. Of course he noticed. Men like him always do. I watched them dance around each other with a growing realization that felt almost like hope. My sister wanted my life. And for the first time in 3 years, I saw a door opening, narrow, dangerous, but undeniably there. All I had to do was help her walk through it. I went to harvest mangoes on a Thursday afternoon, the kind of domestic task that made me invisible. The mango tree stood at the compound's edge, its branches heavy with fruit and secrets. I climbed quietly, my basket in hand, when I heard voices below. Obaina's voice, low and smooth, "Your sister doesn't appreciate what she has." "How do you mean?" Aishara's voice was honey and poison mixed. "A man works hard, provides everything, and what does he get? Burnt food, a cold bed, complaints." He sighed dramatically. "Sometimes I wonder if I made a mistake marrying a village girl with no sophistication." My hands tightened on the branch. This was new. Usually he saved his contempt for private moments, delivered with fist instead of words. "You deserve better," Aishara said. "A man of your status needs a woman who understands the world. Someone with refinement. Someone like you." A pause. I could almost hear her smile. "I would never disrespect my sister's marriage. But if circumstances were different." "Circumstances can change," Obaina said quietly. "In fact, they often do when a man realizes he settled for less than he deserves." I should have felt betrayed. Should have felt rage or heartbreak. Instead, what bloomed in my chest was something dangerous and bright: possibility. They were plotting my disposal. Aishara wanted to steal my husband. Obaina wanted a reason to upgrade to a sophisticated wife. They thought they were being clever, secretive, strategic. They didn't realize they were doing exactly what I needed them to do. I climbed down from the tree, my basket empty, my mind racing. Grandmother Gogo's voice whispered, "When your enemy builds you a boat, smile and help them launch it." That night, I began my own strategy. Not to keep my husband, God, no. But to make sure my sister wanted him badly enough to take him off my hands completely. I started burning the soup on purpose. Started complaining more loudly about his spending. Started being just incompetent enough, just annoying enough, just inadequate enough to make him feel justified in whatever he was planning. And when Aishara visited, I made sure to sigh heavily and say, "Some women are just not strong enough for a powerful man like Obaina. Sometimes I think he needs someone more worthy." I watched her eyes light up like I just handed her a treasure map. Perfect. The egusi soup was supposed to be simple. Grind the melon seeds, add the vegetables, season carefully, simmer until perfect. I'd made it 1,000 times. But that evening, I let it burn. Not obviously. Not dramatically. Just enough that when Obaina tasted it, his face would twist with that particular expression of disgust that meant trouble. "What is this?" He pushed the bowl away, his voice controlled. Dangerously controlled. "Egusi soup." I kept my voice small, apologetic. I thought I seasoned it right." "You thought?" He stood slowly. "A woman who can't cook proper soup is a woman who has forgotten her duties. In the old days, the days before I discovered my sister's ambition, I would have flinched. Would have prepared myself for the explosion. Now I calculated, was Aishara close enough to hear? Was this performance loud enough to reach the right ears? "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'll make another." "Don't bother." He grabbed his keys. "I'll eat at Mama Ngozi's restaurant. At least she knows how to feed a man properly." He stormed out. I counted to 10, then peeked through the window. There she was, Aishara, sitting on her rented veranda 2 houses down, watching with barely concealed satisfaction. I made sure she saw my tears. Made sure she saw me slumped in defeat. Made sure she saw exactly what she expected, a failing wife who couldn't keep her husband happy. The next morning, Aishara arrived with a basket of vegetables and sympathy. "Sister, I heard Obaina was upset last night." She arranged the vegetables with unnecessary care. Men can be so particular about their food. "I don't know what's wrong with me," I said, letting my voice crack. "I used to cook so well. Now everything I touch turns to disaster." "Stress, perhaps." She sat beside me, close enough that I could smell her expensive perfume. Or maybe. She paused delicately, maybe you're just not suited for such a demanding husband. What do you mean? Obaina is a lion, sister. He needs a woman who can match his energy. Someone confident, sophisticated. She touched my hand. No offense, but you've always been the gentle one. The simple one. Maybe that worked when he was simple too, but now? Now he's outgrown me, I finished, making it sound like a revelation instead of the escape plan it actually was. I didn't say that, Aishara protested, her eyes gleaming. But if you're struggling this much, maybe it's worth considering whether you're both truly happy. I let that seed plant itself in her mind, watered it with my carefully performed inadequacy. That week, I burned rice. Oversalted the stew. Forgot to iron his favorite shirt. Became the perfectly annoying wife who made divorce seem merciful. And with each failure, I watched Aishara lean closer to Obaina, her confidence growing, her plans crystallizing. She thought she was stealing a prize. I was actually paying her to take out my garbage. I found Aishara at the market on a Saturday, her basket full of expensive ingredients I recognized, the kind of food Obaina praised when he ate at Mom Ngozi's restaurant. She was studying me carefully, trying to determine if I'd noticed her campaign. Sister, I called, making my voice warm, unsuspecting. Can we talk? We sat under the shade of the Accra seller's umbrella, and I let my shoulders slump with practiced defeat. I need advice, I began, my voice barely above a whisper. About Obaina. Her eyes sharpened with interest. What about him? I think he's losing interest in me. I twisted my wrapper between my fingers. He's always angry now. Nothing I do is right. And I see how he looks at other women. I paused, letting the implication hang. Has he said anything? Aishara asked, too eagerly. Not directly. But I can feel it. The distance. The contempt. I looked at her with carefully crafted vulnerability. You've been to Lagos. You understand sophisticated men. What do they want in a wife? Well, she leaned in, unable to resist the opportunity to demonstrate her superiority. Modern men need women who can match them. Who understand business, politics, social dynamics. Who can dress well, speak well, host well. Everything I'm not, I said sadly. You're a good woman, Halimat. But goodness isn't always enough. She touched my arm with forced sympathy. Some men need fire, not just water. Like you, I said softly. She tried to hide her smile. I didn't say that. But it's true. You're everything I'm not. Confident, worldly, beautiful. I let my voice break. Sometimes I wonder if Obaina wishes he'd met you first. Don't say that, Aishara protested, but her eyes were bright with satisfaction. It's okay, I continued. I've been thinking, maybe I'm not strong enough for a man like him. Maybe he needs someone who can handle his ambitions, his temper, his. I trailed off meaningfully. His temper, she echoed. He's passionate, I said quickly. Like a lion. He roars sometimes, but it's because he cares so much about excellence. I watched her absorb this lie, reframe his violence as masculine intensity. I'm just too weak to appreciate it. You're not weak, she said, but I could see her mind working, calculating. If Halimat was too weak, and if Obaina was available, and if she was strong enough. Maybe I should just step aside, I whispered. Let him find someone worthy of him. Someone like, I stopped, as if catching myself. Like who? Aishara prompted. Nothing. Forget I said anything. I stood quickly. I should go. Thank you for listening. I left her there, the hook baited perfectly. In her mind, I'd just given her permission, no, a plea, for her to save my husband from his inadequate wife. That night, I heard her laughter from Obaina's car. Heard him drive away with her to show her the new farm development. They returned hours later, her lipstick smudged, his collar crooked. The cage door was opening. I just had to make sure she walked through it completely. Aishara's warfare became sophisticated after our market conversation. She stopped pretending subtlety mattered. The morning I saw her leaving the herbalist shop with a small wrapped package, I knew exactly what she'd purchased. Follow me oil. Love potions. Binding charms. The spiritual artillery Lagos women used when seduction alone wasn't enough. That evening, she appeared at our door with a clay pot of palm wine. For my dear brother-in-law, she announced sweetly. A special blend from my Lagos supplier. Very rare. Obaina accepted it with a smile that made my skin crawl. You spoil me, sister. A great man deserves great things, she purred. I watched him drink it that night, the honey-sweetened wine laced with whatever the herbalist had promised would turn his heart. Watched Aishara's eyes follow every swallow, her satisfaction obvious. She'd anointed herself with the follow me oil too. I could smell it, that distinctive cloying sweetness that was supposed to make men lose their minds with desire. She wore it like armor, like certainty, like victory. I'm going to check the back fence, Obaina announced after finishing his drink. Sister Aishara, perhaps you could help. Halimat's eyes are too weak for night work. My eyes were perfectly fine. But I nodded meekly. Of course. I'll clean the dishes. They disappeared into the darkness behind our compound, their voices low and intimate. I gave them 15 minutes, then followed silently. Behind the mango tree, the same tree where I'd first heard their plotting, they stood close enough to be one shadow. His hands were on her waist. Her head tilted back, offering. She doesn't satisfy you, Aishara whispered. I can see it. You need more than she can give. You understand me, Obaina replied, his voice thick with the wine and whatever else she'd fed him. You're a real woman. Not a weak village girl playing at being a wife. I could make you happy, she said. I could give you everything you deserve. Then why don't you? The kiss that followed was my liberation disguised as betrayal. I didn't feel anger. I felt the first breath of freedom entering lungs that had been compressed for 3 years. I walked back to the house silently, began pulling out my hidden savings, gold coins grandmother Gogo had left me, buried in a tin beneath the kitchen floor. Money Obaina didn't know existed. Money that would fund my escape. Behind me, they plotted my disposal. Ahead of me, a new life waited. Let Aishara have her follow me oil and her binding charms. Let her have the lion she thought she was taming. She'd learn soon enough that some cages look like castles until the door locks behind you. I just needed to make sure she walked in willingly, eagerly, completely. The final act was about to begin. The explosion came on a Friday evening, perfectly timed, perfectly orchestrated. I'd spent the week becoming insufferable, questioning his business decisions, sighing loudly when he spoke, wearing my ugliest wrappers, letting my hair go unkempt. Every day, I became a little less of the perfect wife he could parade around. And every day, I watched Aishara grow bolder, her visits longer, her touches more possessive. That Friday, I served him watery soup with unseasoned chicken. The kind of meal that was technically food but spiritually an insult. He stared at it. I watched his jaw clench, his fingers tighten around the spoon. Beside him, Aishara sat at our table now, no longer pretending to be a guest, but settling in like a woman measuring for new curtains. What, Obaina said slowly, is this? Pepper soup, I replied innocently. This is water with chicken bones floating in it. His voice was rising, that familiar precursor to violence. This is what you serve your husband. This disrespect. I did my best. Your best. He stood so fast his chair toppled. Your best is an insult. Your best is a disgrace. I have tolerated your incompetence, your complaints, your complete failure as a wife, but this, he gestured at the soup, this is the final straw. I'd seen this rage before. Usually, it preceded broken ribs or black eyes. But tonight, Aishara was watching. Tonight, he needed to perform righteousness instead of violence. Pack your things, he roared. I want you out of this house. Obaina, please, I dropped to my knees, the picture of a desperate wife. Inside, I was counting gold coins in my mind, planning my bus route to freedom. Brother, maybe you're being too harsh, Aishara interjected, her voice concerned but her eyes gleaming. Perhaps sister just needs time to. Time. Obaina turned to her. I have given her 3 years. 3 years of patience while she grew more useless with each passing day. He looked back at me with theatrical disgust. I married a woman and got a burden. Well, no more. I sobbed convincingly while pulling my wrapper around me. Hidden in its hem, sewn carefully over the past weeks, were my gold coins, 23 pieces, enough to start over. Enough to disappear. Please, I begged. I have nowhere to go. That's not my problem anymore. He pointed at the door. Out. Tonight. Aishara stood, placing a gentle hand on his arm. Brother, let me talk to her. Woman to woman. Perhaps I can make her understand that this is for the best. Their eyes met, and I saw the unspoken agreement pass between them. She would comfort the cast-off wife. He would be free. And in a few respectful weeks, they'd announce their union, shocking no one who'd been paying attention. I gathered my few belongings, clothes that meant nothing, photographs I'd learned to hate, mementos of a marriage that had been a prison from day one. I left behind the expensive fabrics he'd bought me, the jewelry that had been shackles disguised as gifts. At the gate, Aishara found me. Sister, I'm so sorry. But maybe this is for the best. You and Obaina were never truly compatible. You're right, I said quietly, truthfully. Take care of him. I will, she promised, unable to hide her triumph completely. I walked through that gate with nothing but a small bag and a hem heavy with gold. Behind me, Aishara watched me go, believing she'd won. Ahead of me, the night bus to Lagos idled at the motor park. Freedom smelled like diesel fuel and possibility. Aishara moved into the master bedroom 3 days later. The village tongues wagged, too soon, too shameless, too obvious, but she didn't care. She'd won. She had the house, the husband, the status. She was queen of a castle I'd spent 3 years discovering was actually a dungeon. The first night, she cooked her finest meal. Jollof rice with the perfect tomato ratio, pepper chicken glazed to shine, plantains fried to golden perfection. She set the table with candles she'd brought from Lagos, wore her tightest dress, sprayed the follow me oil liberally. Obaina came home late. Took one look at the elaborate dinner and grunted. I already ate at the office. But I made. I didn't ask you to cook. He loosened his tie, walked past her elaborate setup. Next time, wait for instructions. She swallowed her disappointment. Tomorrow would be better. Tomorrow she'd show him that she wasn't like weak Halimat. She was a strong woman who could handle a strong man. The slap came on day 4. She'd rearranged the parlor furniture, an innocent improvement, she thought. Making the space more modern, more sophisticated. More worthy of a Lagos woman. Obaina walked in, stopped cold. Who told you to touch my furniture? I thought it would look better if. His hand moved so fast she didn't see it coming. The impact snapped her head sideways, stars exploding behind her eyes. The taste of blood filled her mouth. You thought. His voice was quiet, controlled, more terrifying than shouting. In this house, you don't think. You obey. Do you understand? She nodded, her hand pressed to her burning cheek, her eyes wide with shock and the beginning of terrible understanding. Good. He straightened his shirt. Now put the furniture back exactly how it was. And make me something to eat. Real food, not that perfumed nonsense you cooked last night. He walked away, already dismissing the incident as corrected behavior. Aishara stood frozen in the parlor she'd tried to improve, her cheek throbbing, her expensive dress suddenly feeling like a costume. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. The follow me oil, the charms, the seduction, they were supposed to make her his queen, his treasure, his beloved. But looking around the house with new eyes, she noticed things she'd been too blind to see before. The careful way Halimat had moved through spaces, always aware of Obaina's moods. The long sleeves even in hot weather. The excessive makeup that Aishara had mocked as village girl vanity. It hadn't been vanity. It had been concealment. In the bedroom that night, Umuaya reached for her with hands that expected compliance. She submitted, understanding for the first time that her body was no longer hers, it was property he'd acquired, to use as he pleased. Afterward, lying in the dark, she touched her swollen cheek and thought of Halimat's face at the gate. That expression she'd interpreted as defeat. It hadn't been defeat. It had been relief. And Aishara, with her Lagos sophistication and her binding charms and her certainty that she could handle what weak Halimat could not, had just locked herself in a cage with a monster who no longer needed to pretend to be a man. If you've ever wanted something so badly you couldn't see the warning signs, maybe this story will help you understand. Sometimes the thing you're fighting to win is exactly the thing someone else is fighting to lose. 3 weeks into her reign as the new Mrs. Adebayo, Aishara learned the full architecture of her prison. The compound walls, which she'd once thought protected a palace, actually prevented escape. The neighbors, who'd envied Halimat, actually pitied her. They'd known all along, but in villages, what happens in a marriage stays in a marriage. The money she thought Umuaya had was mostly debt and facade. The Lexus was leased. The new generator was payment pending. The business success was smoke and mirrors maintained by borrowing from one creditor to pay another. Without Halimat's quiet management, her careful budgeting, her creative stretching of resources, her ability to make nothing look like something, the whole illusion crumbled. "Where is the housekeeping money?" Umuaya demanded one morning. "You haven't given me any. I gave you 10,000 naira last week. That barely covered food for 3 days. The generator needs fuel, we need water." The blow sent her stumbling into the kitchen counter. "Don't tell me about expenses. Figure it out. That's what a wife does." But Aishara had never learned to make something from nothing. She'd learned to spend, to accumulate, to display. She'd learned city survival, which meant knowing which men to charm for free dinners, which friends to borrow from, which schemes to run. Here, in Umuaya, there were no schemes. There was just her, a man who grew more violent as his facade cracked, and walls that seemed to shrink daily. She tried to leave once. Made it as far as packing a bag, calling a friend in Lagos to send transport money. Umuaya found her bag before the money arrived. "You're thinking of running?" He smiled, and that smile was worse than his fist. "Go ahead. Run. Tell everyone how you schemed to steal another woman's husband, moved in 3 days after she left, then discovered you couldn't handle what she handled for years." His eyes glittered. "The village will love that story. Your Lagos friends will love it even more." He was right. The shame would follow her everywhere. She'd burned every bridge to get here, announced her victory too loudly, mocked Halimat too publicly. There was no graceful exit. There was only endurance. One night, she stood at the compound gate, the same gate where she'd watched Halimat leave, and finally understood. This hadn't been a competition she won. It had been a trap she'd walked into willingly, eagerly, while her sister held the door open with a smile. Somewhere in Lagos, in a city where no one knew her story, Halimat was free. And here in Umuaya, Aishara was imprisoned by her own ambition, her own greed, her own certainty that she deserved everything she could take. The follow me oil had worked perfectly. It had followed her right into hell, and now the door was locked from the outside. I stood at the window of my small Lagos apartment, a cup of cold water in my hands, watching the city move below me. The room was modest, 1 bedroom, a tiny kitchen, walls painted lavender because I'd always wanted color, but Umuaya preferred everything white and beige and under his control. My phone buzzed. A message from Mama Ngozi, the restaurant owner from Umuaya. "Your sister is asking about you. Says she needs your help. Should I give her your number?" I deleted the message without responding. My new job at the textile factory wasn't glamorous. I woke at 5, worked until 6, came home exhausted. But the exhaustion was honest, earned from labor instead of terror. And when I closed my door at night, it stayed closed. No one burst through with accusations and fists. The silence was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. Sometimes I thought about Aishara, wondered if she understood yet, if the follow me oil had worn off enough for her to see clearly. Part of me felt guilty. A smaller part felt something like justice. But mostly, I felt free. The gold coins had bought me time, 3 months of rent, food, breathing room to find work and start over. Grandmother Gogo's final gift, the one thing Obaina never knew I had. A woman alone is a woman free, Gogo had said. I finally understood. Being alone wasn't the punishment I'd been taught to fear. It was the prize I'd been too afraid to claim. No one hit me here. No one critiqued my cooking, controlled my movements, turned love into a weapon. I was alone. And I was free. And those two things together created something I thought was lost forever, peace. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Umuaya, another person who'd heard about my abandonment of my marriage, my selfish escape. I turned the phone off. In the kitchen, I made simple soup, nothing fancy, nothing perfect, just food that would nourish me. I burned it slightly and laughed instead of flinching. No one would punish me. No one would care. The sunset painted Lagos in gold and purple, the same colors as the freedom I'd sewn into my wrapper hem. Somewhere in Umuaya, Aishara was learning what I'd known for 3 years, that some prizes are actually punishments disguised as blessings. She'd wanted my life so badly she'd used charms and schemes to steal it. What she'd actually stolen was my suffering. My pain. My prison sentence. And what I'd lost. Only his problems. I raised my cup of cold water to the window, a private toast to every woman who'd ever discovered that losing someone was actually finding yourself. To every cage that looked like a castle. To every escape that looked like defeat. The water tasted like freedom. And freedom, I'd learned, was the sweetest thing I'd ever known. Twins by birth, strangers by choice. What would you do in Halimat's place? Like, share, and subscribe for more gripping African stories that teach lessons for life.